Most men find out their marriage is over when a lawyer slides papers across a table. I found out from a plumber's note, a scrap of yellow paper torn from a contractor's notepad, taped to my coffee maker with a strip of Scotch tape. 7 words from a stranger who came to fix a pipe. And by the time I understood what those words actually meant, I already had everything I needed to rebuild from the ground up. Just not the way Sandra had planned. But let me start from the beginning. I spent 31 years under the hoods of other people's cars. The shop was mine from 1991 to 2022, when my knee finally decided it had heard enough. I didn't grieve it. Being a mechanic isn't a profession in the ordinary sense. It's a way of thinking. You listen to how something runs, and before you even lift the hood, you already know where the problem is. Not because you're smart, because you're paying attention. An engine doesn't lie. It always tells the truth, just in its own language. You have to know how to listen. That skill didn't stay in the shop when I left. Sandra and I had lived 23 years on Harper Lane, a brick ranch house with a porch I rebuilt in 2009, and an oak tree out front that was already about 80 years old when we moved in. I liked the house. I loved the yard. I loved Sandra too, though in the last several years that word had started to sound different somehow. Quieter, like something had gone out of it. Mornings I was up at 6, made coffee, black, no sugar, and sat on the porch with my notebook, where I wrote different things. What needed doing around the house, what I'd read the night before, sometimes just thoughts. Old habit. In the shop I always kept a notebook close, wrote down what I found, what I replaced, what needed a second look. Without records, memory lies. I knew that for a fact. Sandra got up at 8, drank her coffee with milk, and left for work. She was a corporate accounts manager at an insurance company, and she was good at it. She left put together, in good clothes, always with her phone in her hand. Home around 6, sometimes later. We'd have dinner, watch something, go to sleep. Life as life. The first strange thing happened in February. I came into the kitchen for water around 2 in the morning, and Sandra was sitting at the table with her laptop. In the dark, only the screen glowing. I cleared my throat. She snapped the laptop shut so fast I didn't catch a thing. "Can't sleep," she said. "Work emails." I nodded. 2 in the morning. Work emails. I went back to bed and thought about it for about 7 minutes, then decided I was tired and looking for a problem where there wasn't one. She had difficult clients. She had deadlines. Nothing unusual. That's what I told myself. And I almost believed it. In March, she started taking her phone into the bathroom. I didn't think much of it, at first. A lot of people do. But then I noticed she'd started taking it in before bed and staying in there for 20 or 30 minutes. And she'd come back out, a little calmer than she went in. Like someone who had just finished a conversation with someone who mattered. I found an explanation for that too. A friend in another time zone. A work call. Just a habit. I was good at explanations. In April, she asked me not to come into the sunroom while she was on the phone with her mother. "The acoustics are bad in there. You can hear footsteps." I said fine. I didn't go in. But I noticed the call with her mother lasted 47 minutes, and Sandra's mother lived 20 minutes away, and they saw each other every 2 weeks. I started writing things in the notebook. Not deliberately, it just happened that way. Date, time, what exactly? A mechanic records symptoms. It's not suspicion, it's diagnostics. But all of that was still before the note. The note changed everything. It was the 5th of May, a Monday. Sandra left for work at 8, same as always. We'd had a dripping kitchen faucet since morning. Not bad, but irritating, and Sandra had asked me to call someone while she was out. I found a plumber online, a company with good reviews, a guy named Derek Hart. Called him and set up 10 o'clock. Derek showed up at 10:15. A decent man, around 45, tools in a blue duffel bag, He got under the sink, worked for about 30 minutes, replaced a washer and a section of pipe that was starting to split. I paid him cash, he packed up his tools and left. I didn't notice the note right away. It was on the coffee maker. A scrap of yellow paper, taped down. I spotted it when I went to pour a second cup. Picked it up, unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, printed. "Call me before your wife gets home. This is important. Derek." And a phone number. I read it 3 times. Then I set the coffee maker back down. Then I picked up my phone and dialed. Derek answered on the second ring.
I told him who I was. He went quiet for a moment, then said, "Mr. Greer, I need to tell you something, and honestly, I'm not sure how to do it right. But I'd want you to know before she gets back, because you might want some time to think." He worked several houses on our street and the surrounding blocks. Small business, steady clients, word of mouth. A month ago, he'd been over at Nathan Cole's, 3 blocks from us, on Elm. Nathan was a young guy, early 30s, worked at some startup. Derek had been there to fix a water heater. While he was working, Nathan was on the phone, loud, unconcerned, the way people talk when they don't notice someone else is in the room. Derek wasn't trying to listen, but the kitchen was small, and he heard the name Sandra. And then he heard something else. "What exactly?" I asked. My voice was even. It surprised me. "He was talking about your house," Derek said. "About you planning some renovation. About your accounts." He said, I remembered it pretty close to word for word because it struck me as strange. He said, "Everything's on track. By fall, Walt won't have any reason to stick around." Silence. "I don't know exactly what that means," Derek said. "Maybe I heard it wrong. Maybe it's not what I think. But I looked at you today. You seem like a decent man, going about your life, and I thought, if someone knew something like that about me, I'd want to be told. That's all." We talked a little more. I thanked him, said I appreciated it, ended the call. Then I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Through the window, I could see the oak, in full leaf by then, May green. I'd watered it every summer since we moved in, trimmed the lower branches. Once, after a storm, I'd used cable braces to brace the central trunk. By fall, Walt won't have any reason to stick around. I took the notebook and wrote down a name. Nathan Cole. Address, Elm Street. Age, around 30. Then I put the coffee maker back on. That pot had gone cold. And sat down to wait for it to heat. I'm not a mean man, but I am a very patient one. If you're here for the first time, or if you've been following this channel for a while, do one thing. Just hit subscribe. It costs you nothing. It means a great deal to us. Leave a like while you're listening, and drop a comment below with what you think. You'll be glad you stayed. Now, let's continue, because it only gets heavier from here. That night I didn't sleep. Not from anxiety, from my brain working. A mechanic has a habit. When something breaks, you don't panic. You stop and figure out what exactly broke and why. Panic is what happens when you don't understand what's going on. I was starting to understand. And that, strangely enough, made everything calmer. I lay beside Sandra. She was sleeping, breathing steadily, and my mind moved through different things. The fact that she'd asked me last year to add her as co-owner of the house. I'd said, let's wait a little, sort out the taxes first. She hadn't pushed, just nodded and changed the subject. I'd thought at the time that she'd forgotten. Now I thought differently. The fact that 6 months ago she'd suggested transferring one of the cars, my Toyota, into her name. Just more convenient, you've got the truck anyway. I'd agreed without a second thought. The Toyota had been gone from my garage for months. Now I understood it had been a test. How easy is it to change the name on a title? The conversations over the past 2 years. How she'd started saying, our shared assets, more often.
and asking how things work in a divorce situation. I'd thought she was watching finance programs. Television is television. Around 4 in the morning, I got up, poured a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table with the notebook. Wrote down everything I could remember. Dates, things said, episodes. The list was longer than I expected. By fall, Walt won't have any reason to stick around. I read back to the end, put a period, and closed the notebook. Then I opened it again and wrote at the bottom, "Find Nathan Cole." The next morning, while Sandra was at work, I called Ray Bolden. Ray Bolden has been my friend since 1988. We met in the Army, then went our separate ways through life. But every few years, we'd always make a point of seeing each other. He spent 22 years with the Memphis Police Department, the last 8 in the Financial Crimes Unit, then retired and opened a small agency. Private investigations, mostly property disputes and background checks. No big name, no fancy office, just a man who knows how to find things and knows how to keep quiet. I called him at 10 in the morning and said, "Ray, I need some help. Not urgent, but important." He said, "Talk to me." I told him about the note, about the plumber, about the conversation he'd overheard by accident. About by fall, Walt won't have any reason to stick around. Ray went quiet. 5 seconds. A long time for someone who's used to thinking fast. "You check anything yet?" he asked at last. "No, I just found out yesterday." "Right." Another pause. "Listen, Walt, this could be nothing. Could be a coincidence. Guy was on the phone, plumber misheard something." "Could be," I agreed. "But you want to check." "I want to know the truth." "Those are different things," said Ray. "Not as a criticism, just as a fact." "All right, let's take a look." He came the next day, Wednesday, at noon. Parked his Sonata at the curb, came inside, shook hands. Ray Bolden is a big man, 6'1", been going bald since 30, wears thick frame glasses and talks slower than he thinks. That's one of his best qualities. I poured him coffee. He sat at the table, opened his laptop and said, "Walk me through it from the beginning." I did. He listened without interrupting, jotted things down occasionally.
When I finished, he looked up from the screen and asked, "Nathan Cole, that's everything we've got?" "For now." "Address?" "Elm Street, 3 blocks from here. Derek said he was over there to fix a water heater." "Good." Ray looked back at the screen. "I'll find him. See if there are any connections to Sandra. Shared accounts, shared addresses, shared property. If something's there, we'll find it. If not, you'll know it was just a random conversation." "How long?" 3 days, maybe 5. He closed the laptop and looked at me. "Walt, you doing all right?" "Yes," I said. That was true. "You're not angry?" I thought for a second. "I don't know what to be angry about yet. When I know, then I can be angry. Right now, there's nothing to aim at." Ray nodded, finished his coffee, set down the cup. "You've always been the most patient man I've ever known," he said. "It's not a virtue," I answered. "It's just a habit." For 3 days, I lived the way I always lived.
Had breakfast with Sandra. Took out the trash. Drove to the store in my old Ford, a 1997 pickup with 280,000 miles on it, air conditioning that worked maybe half the time, and every neighbor on the street had been telling me for years to get rid of it. I didn't get rid of it. The truck ran steady, didn't give me trouble, and I knew it the way I knew myself. Every sound, every vibration, every habit. That's worth more than newness. On the 3rd day, Ray called. "Walt, you alone right now?" "Yes." "Sit down." I was already sitting. On the porch, with coffee. "I found Nathan Cole," Ray said. Nathan Cole, 33 years old, product manager at a tech startup. Not married. Has been renting a house on Elm since September before last. "September before last," I repeated. "That's right," Ray said. He moved in there 2 months after he registered on a video conferencing platform using an email address that's very close to your wife's. just a dot in a different place. I'm calling that a hypothesis for now, not a fact. But here's where it gets more interesting. I didn't interrupt. I checked the public records on your address. 3 weeks ago, someone requested a market value appraisal of your house. It's a legal process, could be a lot of reasons. But the request was made under the name S. Greer, Sandra Greer. She never said anything to me about that. No, Ray agreed. And on its own, that doesn't prove anything. Maybe she just wanted to know the value. But combined with what the plumber said, by fall, Walt won't have any reason to stick around. Yeah, a pause. Walt, I think we need to dig deeper. Finances, insurance policies, possible documents. This'll take another week, maybe 2. You ready to wait? I looked at the oak in the yard. A May wind moved the leaves. I've been waiting 31 years for an engine to tell me the truth, I said. I can wait another 2 weeks. While Ray was working, I kept living the way I lived, just more carefully. I noticed that Sandra drove somewhere every Tuesday. Pilates, she said. She'd had Pilates every Tuesday for 3 years, and I'd never thought about it. Now I looked. The Pilates studio she mentioned was 5 minutes from our house. Elm Street was 9 minutes. I wasn't following her. I just wrote it in the notebook. Once, near the end of May, she came home with a bag from a kitchen store. Took out a pretty mug, white, gold rim. Said, "Look what I found. Isn't it beautiful?" Set it on the shelf. I asked, "Who's that for?" She said, "No one, just for us." I nodded. A few days later, I noticed the mug wasn't on the shelf. I didn't ask. In the first week of June, Ray sent me an encrypted email. He always used encrypted mail for work materials. Inside was a photograph. A screenshot of a public company profile, registered in January. The directors section showed 2 names. The second, Sandra Greer, not S. Greer. The full name. My wife.
I printed the email and put it in the notebook. Between the pages of notes, Ray found the first truly important thing 8 days later. He called on a Friday evening while Sandra was at a girlfriend's, or at least that's what she said. I was in the garage, listening to the radio, drinking coffee from a thermos. The garage had always been my place. Tools on the walls, the smell of oil and metal, quiet. "Walt, I've got something," Ray said. "It's serious." "Go ahead." Nathan Cole visited a law firm for a consultation 3 months ago. Harmon and Associates. Good firm, family law. I can't know what was discussed, that's privileged. But I know the meeting lasted an hour and a half. Silence. "That's not a crime in itself," Ray continued. "Anyone can consult an attorney for any reason. But I've got something else. I found a letter of intent in the public records."
That's a document sometimes drafted for a joint property acquisition. It's not officially registered, but it's used as the basis for a future transaction. The document is dated January of this year. Among the signatures, S. Greer. "What property?" Ray paused. "A parcel of land 20 miles north of the city. 3 acres. Title was transferred at the end of last year to a company registered in January, with 2 directors, Nathan Cole and a party identified as S. Greer." I set the thermos down on the workbench. Quiet. Just the radio. S. Greer had signed a joint land purchase agreement with a man she claimed not to know, in January. That was when we celebrated her birthday. I bought her topaz earrings. She'd been wanting them for a while. We had dinner together, at a restaurant she chose. She was in a good mood all evening. "You still there?" Ray asked. "I'm here," I said. "Walt, this still isn't the full picture. There could be explanations. Maybe it's someone else with a similar name, but I think we need to bring in a proper attorney and give me another couple of weeks." "Find everything there is," I said, "every last piece of paper." Ray found the last piece 9 days later. He called on Sunday morning. I'd just gotten back from my morning walk. I had a habit of walking around the neighborhood for an hour each morning, thermos in hand, no headphones, just walking and thinking. Sandra was still asleep. "Walt," said Ray, and from the way he said my name, I knew this was it. He'd found an insurance policy, a life insurance policy, taken out 8 months earlier. Insured party, Walter Greer. Beneficiary, not me. The beneficiary had been changed at the end of September the year before. It was a name I didn't recognize, but Ray had run it, and it traced back to one of the addresses Nathan Cole had used. "She changed the beneficiary without your knowledge?" Ray asked. "I never signed any changes to the policy," I said. "So either the signature was forged or someone accessed your account online." I remembered something from about a year back. Sandra had asked me to log into my insurance company's online portal. "Update the contact number. Mine isn't loading for some reason." I logged in while she was there. She said, "Thanks, got it," and closed the laptop. I hadn't thought anything of it. Now I did. "Ray," I said, "can you get someone to assess how criminal this is?" A long pause. "Depends how the signature was handled. If it was forged, document fraud. If someone got unauthorized access to your account, that's also a crime. The land deal could pull in charges related to hiding marital assets. I'd recommend you talk to a family law attorney and possibly a criminal attorney, simultaneously." "I know a good one," I said. That was Frank Colbert. We'd met about 15 years back. He brought his car to my shop, then his wife, then his father-in-law. Frank handled property and family law, and he had a reputation as someone who doesn't lose his footing when others do. I called him Monday morning. Frank came Wednesday. I laid everything out, in order, with dates, with the documents Ray had compiled and printed for me. Frank listened, read, listened again. When I finished, he closed the folder and looked at me. "This is serious, Walt." "I know." "Are you prepared for this to go beyond a divorce?" "I'm prepared for whatever is the truth," I said. Frank nodded. "Good. We need originals, not copies. We need to formally request the insurance policy's change history, and we need to get all of this documented before she realizes you know. Because the moment she does, documents could disappear." "How long?" 3 weeks, maybe 4. "Can you keep things normal for another month?" I thought about the kitchen, the oak in the yard, Sandra sleeping beside me while I've been writing her name in a notebook. "I can," I said. The hardest part wasn't not knowing. I'd already been through that. The hardest part was knowing and being quiet. We lived normally, had breakfast, she drove to work, I went to the store, walked with my thermos, worked in the garage. In the evenings we watched TV. She laughed sometimes at something in a show. I laughed too, not because anything was funny, because I know how to be where I need to be. Once, at the end of May, she said over dinner, "Walt, have you thought about maybe moving, changing the scenery, get something smaller?" "Why?" I said. "The house is good." "Well, there's 2 of us. A lot of unused space." "I'm used to the space." She shrugged and changed the subject. I remembered it and wrote it down. Conversation about real estate. May. Dinner. In June, Frank received an official response from the insurance company. The policy's change history showed the request to alter the beneficiary had been made through the online portal from an IP address that turned out to be associated with the home network on Elm Street. Not our address. Nathan Cole's address. Someone had accessed my account from his address, or from a device that had been in his house. Frank notified the insurance company officially. They froze the changes and opened an internal investigation. At the same time, Frank sent a formal inquiry to the notary who had purportedly certified the land agreement's signature, wanting to verify whether proper procedure had been followed. "What's next?" I asked. "We wait for the notary's response. And there's one more thing." Frank opened the folder. Ray found ATM camera footage. Not evidence on its own, but there's something of note. In October last year, over 3 weeks, $18,000 in cash was withdrawn from the joint account. In small amounts, 500, 800 at a time. Were those withdrawals yours? "No," I said.
Were you reviewing the account statements? No, I didn't pay that close attention to the account. She always handled the finances. Right. Frank closed the folder. That's exactly why you weren't prepared for this. Exactly why it was designed to be invisible. 18,000. 500, 800 at a time. Careful. Methodical. Small enough to avoid triggering anything. I thought back to something Ray had said earlier in the summer. He'd said, "A financial scheme doesn't shout, it whispers." That had been a hypothesis then. Now it was a fact. 18,000 in cash. And that was just what we'd found for 3 weeks in October. We hadn't checked the other months yet. At the end of June, the notary responded. He had not certified the signature of S. Greer on the land agreement. The signature was there. The stamp was there. But the notary stated in writing, this document had not come through his office. Either it was a different notary with an identical stamp, or the entire document was fabricated. Frank referred the materials to the district attorney's office. By that point, I had unauthorized access to an insurance policy, a beneficiary change made without my knowledge, $18,000 in cash withdrawals from the joint account over 3 weeks, a land agreement with an apparently forged notarial stamp, and, where it all began, 7 words from a plumber who had simply wanted to do the right thing. By fall, Walt won't have any reason to stick around. Frank came by twice more in July. We cross-checked documents, discussed next steps. He was calm and methodical, exactly the kind of attorney you want. Ray delivered a new statement. November showed another $7,200, also in installments. December, $4,800.
We tallied. Running total at that point, $30,440. Withdrawn carefully, patiently, 500 to 800 at a time. I wrote that number in the notebook, then sat and looked at it. 30,000. That was half our emergency fund, what we'd always called our rainy day account. I knew it existed, hadn't checked it in years. Why would I? I trusted. At the end of July, she asked if I wanted to drive to the coast for the weekend. Just to breathe, we could both use some air. I said I didn't want to. My back had been bothering me. A long drive wasn't comfortable. She didn't push. She went without me. To a girlfriend's in Nashville, she said. Came back Sunday evening, tan, in a good mood. I didn't ask. In the first days of August, Frank said we had enough to present. He wanted a meeting, formal, with witnesses, before filing anything officially. Give her a chance to speak for herself, he explained. That's how a proper process works. You don't ambush someone. You sit down at a table and lay out the facts. I agreed. We set a date, Saturday, August 8th, 10 in the morning. August. I sat in the garage Friday evening. Sandra had said she was going to a girlfriend's. She said that about once a week. The radio played something quiet. I was drinking coffee, already cold, long cold, and looking at the wall of tools. 31 years I'd worked with those, each one in its place, each one for its purpose. The garage is my best thinking instrument. I never understood people who think in motion, on a run, behind the wheel. I think when I'm standing still or sitting quietly with something solid around me. The tools on the walls are solid. The smell of oil is solid. Concrete, honest, not trying to be anything other than what it is. I thought about 23 years. Not with pain, with curiosity. A man who spent 30 years in diagnostics can't help asking, where exactly did the crack begin? Not in February, when I saw the laptop on the kitchen table at 2 in the morning. Not in that phone conversation Derek had accidentally overheard. Earlier than that. I thought, maybe in 2019, when we started talking less over dinner. Or in 2020, when she began mentioning money more often. We need to think about the future. At our age, you can't be asleep at the wheel. Or maybe earlier still. Maybe the crack had always been there, and I just hadn't been listening. A mechanic knows. A crack in an engine block doesn't appear suddenly. It grows. First invisible, then microscopic, then deep enough that pressure starts to drop. The car looks fine from the outside for a long time after that. Then you hear a sound. Then everything stops. I wasn't angry at her. That surprised me, but there was no anger. What there was curiosity. And something else. A cold, very quiet resolve. Not to get back at her, just to finish this the right way. A mechanic doesn't take revenge on an engine that failed. He takes it apart, sees where exactly, and decides what to do next. I took the notebook, page through from the beginning, laptop on the kitchen table. 2 in the morning, February. Phone to the bathroom, March. Sunroom closed, 47 minutes with her mother. April. The plumber's note, May 5th. And after that, pages in neat handwriting. Dates, amounts, addresses, names. 31 years I'd been writing down what broke and how I fixed it. This was a different kind of record. I closed the notebook, called Ray. "Ray," I said, "tomorrow morning, can you be here by 10? "I can. Something happen?" "No, I just think it's time." Ray was there at 10. 20 minutes later, Frank arrived. Sandra was still asleep. We sat at the kitchen table. Me, Ray, Frank. Coffee. The folder of documents in the center. Outside it was August, hot, and the oak stood quietly. At 11, Sandra came out of the bedroom, saw the three of us.
Stopped in the kitchen doorway. "Walt?" she said. Her voice was even. She was sharp. "Good morning," I said. "Sit down. We need to talk." She didn't move for 3 seconds. Then she walked to the table and sat. Frank opened the folder. "Sandra, my name is Frank Colbert. I represent Walter's interests. I'd like to walk you through what we found and give you an opportunity to explain yourself before we proceed." "Proceed with what?" she asked. Her voice was a shade harder. "The formal process," Frank said. He laid down the first page. "This is the change history for your life insurance policy. The request was made from an IP address on Elm Street. That's Nathan Cole's address." Silence. "This," Frank continued, placing a second page, "is the notary's response regarding the land agreement dated January of this year. The notary confirms this document did not come through his office. His stamp is on it nonetheless." Sandra was looking at the table. Her hands rested in front of her. Still. Very still. "And this," Frank said, "is the statement from your joint account for October of last year. $18,440 withdrawn in cash over 3 weeks. We are also reviewing other periods." Sandra finally raised her eyes. "Walt," she said, quiet, almost soft. "This isn't what it looks like." "Tell me what it is then," I said. She was quiet for 4 seconds. Then, "It was an investment. I wanted to do something for both of us. I just hadn't gotten around to telling you." "You hadn't gotten around to it in 8 months. "Walt, you hadn't gotten around to it while you were withdrawing the money." "It's a joint account. I have every right." $500 a day, Ray said. Calm, no affect. "Exactly the amount to stay under a bank's automatic alert threshold. I worked financial crimes for 22 years. That's exactly what it looks like." Sandra looked at Ray, then back at me. "Walt, please, can we talk without them here?" "No," I said. "Please." "No." She looked at me for a long second. It was a different look than the one she'd had for Frank. This one was only for me. Something in it was almost real. Not remorse, not fear, but something in between, as if she were searching my face for something she could use, and not finding it. I stood up, took my cup, and poured more coffee. Then I came back and sat down. "I want to say one thing," I said. "Not to Frank. To you." Sandra looked up. "Last year you told me I'd gotten old before my time, that I had an old truck, an old house, that I lived like a retiree when I could do otherwise. You were laughing when you said it. You thought it sounded warm. I remembered it." She said nothing. "Maybe you're right that I got old before my time. But I built everything in this house with my own hands, and I found every piece of paper that's lying on this table right now." I set down my cup. "You knew my password. You never knew how I think when I'm deciding something." Frank closed the folder. "We need to move forward," he said. We moved forward. The process took several months. Sandra hired an attorney. Good one. Expensive. There was an attempt to negotiate. She offered to return the money and settle everything privately. Frank explained that was no longer our decision, because the district attorney's office and the insurance company were involved. The decisions were now partly theirs. Nathan Cole hired a different attorney. The notarial stamp turned out to have been purchased from a website. The DA's office determined that. The land agreement was declared void. The insurance account access was classified as unauthorized. The cash withdrawals became part of a civil claim. The divorce was finalized in November. I won't say it was easy. Not one day of it was easy. There are things that don't pass quickly and don't pass completely. 23 years don't pass. But there's a difference between pain that leaves you and pain that carries you. This pain carried me. I let it carry me, and I wrote down in the notebook everything it brought. In December, I drove to my brother's for the first time in 3 years, in Nashville. We hadn't seen each other in a long while. I got in my Ford, 1997, 280,000 miles, air conditioning hit or miss, and drove. 3 hours on the highway. Radio worked. I stopped at the gas station, bought coffee, drove on. My brother opened the door and said, "You look good." I said, "I feel all right." That was true. I heard about Sandra through people we knew in common. She and Nathan Cole had split before the proceedings were even finished. That wasn't surprising. She'd moved somewhere out of state. I didn't ask for details. That's her life, not mine. Frank called in February about something unrelated, just to talk. We talked for a while about different things. At the end, he said, "How are you doing, Walt?" I said, "Fine. Fixed up the garage, painted the fence." He laughed. So did I.
Ray came by in March for a barbecue. We grilled in the yard. The oak stood there, 83 years old by now probably, and in no hurry to go anywhere. Ray looked at it and said, "That's a good tree." I said, "Yeah, I've been watering it for 30 years. In April, I found the notebook in a drawer. First entry, February, laptop on the kitchen table, 2 in the morning. I leafed through it, read a few pages, then closed it and put it back. The old Ford is still mine. Everyone says it's time to replace it. I don't replace it. It knows where to go. I know it. That's worth more than new. I'm not a mean man, but I know how to wait for an engine to tell me the truth on its own. And when it does, I listen.